Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. How are you guys all going? I haven't really had time to ask how you are doing in this course. Um, it has the lecture speed been good for you? Am I going too fast? Am I clear? If there's anything you would like to ask, Trent is usually here helping, so which makes really the online sessions really great because I've got somebody who is actually answering questions as as we are going through the material. So that's a really good thing. Um, Looks like we are good to go. I haven't heard any. There's nothing on the chats at the moment. Okay. I'm just gonna start. If you have any comments, please put that in the chat, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. Now, I'll start a recap. We started talking about imperfectly competitive markets on Tuesday, and we're going to start by looking at that topic. I'm a little bit worried only because the chat's so freakily quiet. I didn't even hear Trent. Never mind. All good. Now, as a recap, what does it mean to be an imperfectly competitive market? We just need one of these assumptions below to break or be violated, and we will not be in a perfectly competitive market. Now, if consumers or suppliers are not price takers, then you're not in a perfectly competitive market. If goods are not homogeneous, if everyone is not selling the same goods, then we're not in a perfectly competitive market. So, as an example, if you think about, fried noodles, Asian fried noodles, you walk into an Asian restaurant and you order a plate of noodles. Do they have the exact same ingredients with the exact same taste? Let's say, for example, I walked into a Thai restaurant and I ordered pad Thai. Did the fried noodles from one store and the pad Thai from another store, did they have the exact same ingredients and the exact same taste? And then we talk about whether there are externalities. We talk about whether, external costs or benefits from a given action, or goods are not excludable. And a rival example, your fireworks at the end of the year. You can't exclude somebody else who's looking up into the sky, the joy of experiencing the fireworks. And finally, we also talked about the fact that there's no free entry or exit, meaning that we have barriers. So the two that we mentioned that we're going to focus on is this one here and this one here that we elaborated on. So we said that consumers or suppliers are not price takers, meaning that they are price makers. And when we say that there's no free entry or exit, we say that there are barriers. Okay, let's talk about being a price maker to start with. A firm is said to be a price maker or a price setter if they have the ability to set its own prices. Now, a firm, because it is a price maker if they have ability to set their own prices, and a firm with the ability to set its own price has market power. Therefore, we can say that a price maker has market power. Now, on Tuesday, we talked about Twitter and how Twitter sets the prices that Twitter went through to set its price. Let's look at a different example. Let's look at Tesla's direct-to-consumer pricing. Tesla sets its price without dealership negotiations. So if you go into most other car companies, you will find that they are attached to a dealership, and then the car manufacturing company like Mazda or Honda or my brain's stuck for car brands at the moment, but they are attached to a dealer, so a dealership would sell those cars. Whereas Tesla sells their cars directly to customers. What they are able to do as a result of that is to control both price and supply. Tesla adjusts their price globally based on internal strategy and not local competition. This is a price maker's behavior. Okay, so Tesla is seen to be a price maker. Now, why is the demand curve downward sloping? Now, I mentioned last week that your market demand and supply curve, so I'm going to add a few annotations on this. Your market demand curve for perfect competition, that's your aggregate demand and that's your aggregate supply. The market sets its price. The price that the market sets will determine the price of the individual firm. Okay, so even though a monopoly is a price maker, it still faces the market demand curve, which is downward sloping. The only difference between perfect competition and monopoly is that the market demand curve in a monopoly does not determine the price for the individual firms. In a monopoly, the market demand curve is actually the same as your individual demand curve because there's only one firm. However, it is downward sloping because if a monopolist wants to sell more units, it must lower its price. We talked about Twitter last week. We said that Elon Musk wanted to set the price of Twitter originally at $19.99. But at $19.99, he will only have X number of subscribers. And as a result of that, he had decided that he was going to decrease the price down to $8 so that he could attract more subscribers willing to pay $8 per month for a verification checkbox or something like that. Okay, so Twitter made you think that you had the power to set the price. But what he did he was the one that set the price. Because consumers' response to price changes and the monopolies consumers respond to price changes and the monopolist has no competitions to absorb the excess demand or offer any alternatives. You want the product, that's it. You got to pay for the product. Now, we go back very quickly and talk about perfect competition. Just as a recap, we said that the price is at P because the individual price perfect competitive firms are price takers. If you decide to increase the price to P2, there's no demand. Because imagine that you are in agriculture and you sell wheat. If you decide to put your price up above what everybody else is charging, there's so many people selling wheat. They don't have to buy from you, and therefore you will end up with no demand. So it is therefore not possible to increase price. Or, on the other hand, why would you want to decrease price to below P when you can sell at the higher price? So therefore, we are stuck at this price, and thus being a price taker. Now, we also talked last lecture about the different types of market power. I drew that timeline at the top showing you perfect competition on one end of the scale, monopoly on the other end of the scale, monopolistic being closer to perfect competition, and oligopolistic competition closer to monopoly. We said that because we've just finished weeks of perfect competition, where we said that the characteristics of perfect competition are homogeneous products, no barriers to entry or exit, no, free information, so you have full information available to you. Did I say homogeneous products? I hope I did. Well, monopolistic competition is very similar to perfect competition with two differences. One is that they produce a slightly differentiated product. There's still a large number of firms similar to perfect competition, but these products are slightly different. If I go I was talking about a Thai restaurant. If I go to one Thai restaurant, I go to another Thai restaurant, there's a little bit of a difference. I might like the taste of one, the food in one restaurant better than the taste of the same dish in another restaurant. So that is slight differentiation. It's still relatively close perfect substitutes. Pad Thai is Pad Thai. But the taste of one Pad Thai is better than the taste of the other. Or the location where this particular Thai restaurant is better than the location of this other Thai restaurant. Excuse me. Okay. So examples of a monopolistic competition would be your restaurants. Then we look at, we'll just go back. We're not going to do monopolistic competition in this course. So we're just talking about the characteristics and, what that is about and where it sits on that scale. Then we look at oligopolistic competition, which we're going to look into great detail next week. Oligopolistic competition is where there are small number of firms selling goods that are close substitutes. Examples of oligopolistic competition will be your banks in Australia. We have ANZ, Westpac, NAB, CommBank, St. George. There's only a small number. There isn't like a whole heap. And they all sell banking products, so they are relatively close substitutes. I can move from one bank to the other, wouldn't know the difference. Airlines are another example of oligopolistic competition. We'll look at oligopolies in a lot of detail shortly. Next week, actually, sorry. Now, we're then going to look at barriers. Barriers are things that block you from entering the market. Now, one of the barriers would be control over scarce resources. Imagine that you go out into the world and buy up all the diamond mines. You control the diamond market. Or you've gone out and bought oil fields all around the world. Well, you have control overall. So no matter whether it's the diamond market that you're trying to, the diamonds that you're controlling worldwide, or the oil that you're controlling worldwide, the point is that no one can enter the market because no one can get hold of those resources that you have full control over. Now, OPEC is a cartel. We talked about OPEC last week. OPEC stands for Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. There are 13 member countries in total as part of OPEC. And Saudi Arabia is the largest and the most influential member, purely because they own a lot of those scarce resources. And what Saudi Arabia does, being the most influential and the largest member, is that they coordinate policies and manage the global market. So what they do is they set oil production quotas, and by setting oil production quotas, they are indirectly influencing the supply and the price. Next, we talk about government creating barriers such as patents, copyrights, licenses. Let's look at patents. Hypothetically, let's give an example, Panadol. Probably one of the most commonly known pharmaceutical medication. I'm hoping everybody has heard of Panadol. Now, Panadol is not the name of the medicine. Panadol is actually the name of the brand. The original patent for paracetamol that actually has a chemical name, which unfortunately I do not know how to pronounce. I'm going to leave that. The original patent for paracetamol was filed in the US in the 1950s. These key patents were then starting to expire in the 1980s and 1990s. So it wasn't just one patent. It was a few patents as they were doing their research, because ultimately the patents take effect the minute they're filed, not when they are being sold on the shelf. So clearly, Panadol no longer holds the patent. They're now off patent. But if you look at your local pharmacy, I went online and I looked at Chemist Warehouse, one of our most reasonably priced pharmacies. They sell 100 tablets of Panadol brand paracetamol, Panadol, for $16.99. But Panamax, which is the exact same chemical compound, it's what we call in Australia a generic brand, 100 tablets of the same thing without the brand costs $4.39. Now, I had people ask, so why would you pay $16.99 if you can pay $4.39 for a box of the exact same quantity and the exact same item? Well, people pay the higher price because of psychological effects. For example, if you grew up hearing your parents go, oh, you have a fever, let's give you Panadol. Then when you get older, you're like, oh, I have a headache, I'm going to go buy some Panadol. And you are quite used to the brand, the relationship between, consumption and the brand. You trust the brand, in inverted commas, because that's all you knew in those years where the patent was effective. There wasn't any other alternatives. Whereas now, if you go to a pharmacy in Australia, you'll see lots of different types or brands of Panadol. Now, just as an interesting fun fact for you, this is how profitable a company becomes if you end up with a patent. A medical patent lasts you 20 years, approximately, from the point of filing. Like I said to you before, it's not when you start selling it. Okay, so the effectiveness of that patent is not 20 years long, unfortunately. But Sterling Drug filed that patent. The company Sterling Drug filed that patent in 1976. In 1988, that company that was holding the patent was sold to another company called Eastman Kodak. These were corporate acquisitions. They did not buy the patent. They bought the company. Eastman Kodak was then acquired by SmithKline Beecham in 1994 and now forms part of GlaxoSmithKline, which is also known as GSK. If you look at the box of Panadol, it says GSK somewhere on the box. So these are corporate acquisitions. A very up and coming, a drug that is very expensive, that has been in the media a lot at the moment, is a diabetic drug called Ozempic. Ozempic has been patented. Ozempic, according to media, has a lot of side effects, but Ozempic has been patented, and the Ozempic patent expires approximately 2032. So that is the reason why at the moment Ozempic is quite expensive, because they are trying to recover the costs that the government has allowed them to get back their research and development costs, basically. The third point is increasing returns to scale. This is our biggest problem. Increasing returns to scale occurs when a business increases its input by a certain amount and the output increases by a greater proportion. This is a long-run concept where all factors of production are variable. Factors of production such as labor and capital, they're all variable. Now, firms experience increasing returns. We said here in this particular slide that increasing returns are also known as economies of scale, where the average cost of producing certain goods decreases with the amount of goods produced. So I said on Tuesday, quantity increase, your average total cost will decrease. See that graph going down. Firms experience increasing returns because of specialization. They experience increasing returns because of bulk buying. Technological, CHNOLOGICAL, advancements, or management or management efficiency. What do you mean by all that? Specialization. Workers and machines become more efficient with focused tasks. Imagine, I was saying to the live class earlier, that imagine I work in a car manufacturing plant, and my job is to put the windows, to fit the windows on a car. I've worked in this factory for 10 years, and I can basically fit a car window with both eyes closed. And so I might even be sleeping and doing fit windows. But the point that I'm trying to make is you are specialized in that particular part of the in putting the car together. We take all the different parts and we put the car together. And Esther's in charge of fitting the windows, and she's so good at it. No car window is going to leak. It's done perfectly. It's done fast. It takes me, less than a minute to do it because I'm so good at it. So I become effective. So I get increasing returns to scale because I'm very, very good at this one job that I am doing. Bulk buying. Larger firms can negotiate better input prices. If I buy 100 pens, I might get I might pay $5. If I buy 100,000 of these pens, I might pay $1. So bulk buying reduces my average total cost. Technological advancements. Bigger firms can afford better equipment. Better equipment might produce your products faster. They're more efficient. Managerial efficiency. For example, admin costs. If I produce 100 cars, I still have to hire, let's say, 300 employees. Okay? I manufacture 100 cars. If I manufacture 100,000 cars, I'm not needing to increase the number of accountants and admin person in my team. So the fixed admin costs are then spread over the larger output quantity. Let's have a look. Let me take you to OneNote. I just want to quickly show you. I just mentioned long run average total cost. So if you look down here, the more I'm producing, the less my cost. So clearly down here, I have economies of scale. Increasing returns to scale. And what that means is that when my output increase, my average total cost decrease. I know we're not focusing on this, but just to complete that entire graph, this is what we call, when it's flat, constant returns to scale. And if we look at this part that's going up, this is economies of scale. Okay, so with this economies of scale, which is the opposite of economies of scale, what is happening with this economies of scale is that your average cost will increase when output increase. And this is because of inefficiencies. It might be as a result of overexpansion, coordination issues, resource constraints, whatever they might be. Now, sorry, trying to get my mouse to change slides. Okay. So we then say that increasing returns to scale, if a firm is experiencing it, becomes more profitable with size, because your average total cost is literally going down as you produce more and more and more. So the reason for that is because you can do that more effectively. So in this particular market, whoever gets a large number of customers such that they can spread their cost across a lot of people and produce at very low cost. As soon as the company gets to that point, it is very hard for other new companies to enter and compete, because they have to pay a very high ATC as they start to ramp up their customers, because you have been able to produce at a very low and efficient cost. So that's one of the problems or barriers. The last one that we want to talk about, drop my pen. The last one that I want to talk about is network economies. Now, Facebook has 3.07 billion monthly active users. Okay, on a monthly basis, Facebook has approximately 3.07 billion. If Facebook only has Mark Zuckerberg, one person, then what's the whole point of that? Because that will be quite useless. But because they have 3.07 billion people, that's why it's so amazing. It's so effective. I have had students contact me via Facebook. I have had wedding invitations come my way delivered via Facebook, because it is a way for people to contact others that they might not know their phone number, or lost their phone number, or lost their email address. It's a way of communication. Now, we know that Donald Trump tried to replace, I think replace is a big word. He tried to enter that market to compete with Facebook. He thought that, I have 38 million followers on Facebook. When I move out of Facebook, when he got banned from Facebook and Twitter, that his loyal followers are going to follow him across to trumps truth social. But as of January 2025, when Facebook has 3.07 billion monthly active users, Trump's Truth Social only has 6.3 million monthly active users. So the impact, the ability to get onto that market, to enter that market, to compete effectively is rather hard, because you're comparing 6.3 million users with 3.07 billion users. That is what we call network economies. Now, if you are producing a large quantity of good, we said earlier that if you have increasing returns to scale, then you'll be more profitable with size. And because you're more efficient than a large number of small firms, each producing small quantities, you are one big firm producing huge amount of quantities. We call this a natural monopoly. Okay? A natural monopoly occurs when one single firm can supply goods or services to the entire market at a lower cost than many small firms could. I mentioned Sydney Water last week and say, can you imagine Sydney Water has all their infrastructure, they've dug holes, they've laid pipes. That was hundreds, millions, trillions worth of money that they would have spent over the, centuries. Can you imagine you as small little firms trying to lay pipes and supplying water to Sydney? That's just not efficient. So companies like Sydney Water, Transgrid that provides electricity transmissions, Australian Rail Track Corporation, also known as ARTC, they oversee the interstate freight rail line. So if I want to send goods on a train to Melbourne or to Brisbane, and then being able to connect with the rest of Australia, Austrac does that. And you just want one set of rail lines. You don't need lots of different companies coming in and building rail lines everywhere. Just not efficient. So a natural monopoly is a monopoly that occurs because of increasing returns to scale. Now we're going to look at the table, where how do we calculate the numbers. Now this table, please don't be scared, this table is the same as what we used in perfect competition. Let's have a look. Let's say that you have no workers, nobody working for you. When you have no workers, you don't produce anything. But your fixed cost is still 100, because you might have bought machinery and that is your, daily repayment cost. So whether you use your machine or not, the amount that you are spending is equivalent to $100. That's fixed. Whether you produce 100 units, 1,000 units, 1,000,000 units, you're still going to incur that $100 a day. Okay. Now, variable cost, on the other hand, variable cost changes with in this particular example, with the number of workers we hire. So per unit of variable cost is $10. If we don't hire anyone, we pay nothing. Okay? And if we don't hire anyone and we don't produce anything, all we have to pay is fixed costs. So fixed costs 100 plus variable cost of 0 gives you total cost of 100. When you calculate the average total cost, because your variable costs are 0, your quantity is 0, your total cost, either your quantity is 0 or your variable cost is 0. So that's why we leave that blank. Now we're going to increase one worker. By hiring one worker, we are able to produce 200 units per day. But at 200 units per day, we are still incurring $100 in fixed costs. Doesn't change, fixed. But now that we hire one worker, this is $10 multiplied by one worker, which gives you $10. So your total cost is your fixed cost plus your variable cost, which gives you 110. I think I can leave it to you to fact check that this is correct and that this is correct. Okay, I'm going to leave that to you because I think you guys are very intelligent and I don't have to constantly repeat myself. Now, your average variable cost. Your average variable cost is your variable cost divided by quantity. So, for example, when we hire one worker, our quantity is 200. Our variable cost is 10. So 10 divided by 200 is 1 over 20, 0.05. Can you see there that your variable cost increases by 10 and your quantity increases by 200? And here your average variable cost is constant. Okay, actually I should write it here, constant. Now your marginal cost is your change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. So from 0 to 1, our change in quantity was 200. Our change in total cost was 10 because 100 to 110. So my marginal cost is 0.05. Let's do one more just to be sure. When I hire worker 2, my change in total cost from 10 to 20. So that's 10. I produce an extra 200 units. So divided by 200, that's exactly the same. So my marginal cost is 0.05. And if you look further down, all of the rest are the same in terms of total cost increase by 10, total quantity increase by 200. And so this marginal cost is also constant. Okay, which means that your marginal cost is 0.05. It's horizontal. It's the same no matter what. Now, what about our average total cost? Let's have a look at our average total cost. Our average total cost from 0.55 to 0.3 to 0.22 to 0.17 to 0.15, this is decreasing. So what does that graph look like? That's your average total cost. And this is your increasing returns to scale. Okay. Now, the next question that we're going to ask is, how does a monopolist maximize its monopolist profit? Let's see if I have no. Now, this is also the same as a perfectly competitive firm, nothing new. Remember earlier I said that, let's say hypothetically this is $10, that if I sell 100 units, I sell it as $10. If I sell 100,000 units, I'm also selling at $10. So here, for each unit extra that you sell, your marginal revenue equals $10. But we know that in a monopoly, we have a downward sloping demand curve, and therefore marginal revenue is not constant, because it is a downward sloping demand curve. Now, I'm going to show you, hopefully, this slide. Now, at 0.85, now, just before I continue, if you are worried that I'm using the step curve again, if you like this better, you really could just take the points. And that's your demand curve, downward slope. Okay. But I just wanted to show you the area of surplus that we get, or what's the revenue that we get, your total revenue. So at 85 cents, quantity demanded by consumers is 200. So at 85 cents, your total revenue equals 200 multiplied by 0.85. Your total revenue is that there. If we decrease our price to 0.65, the quantity demanded by customers will increase by 200 to 400, and therefore total revenue equals 400 multiplied by 0.65. Now, looking at that tall, skinny, fat, short, it's not actually immediately clear that if price decrease from 0.85 to 0.65, because there is a trade-off. Because your lower price will get you more customers. That's your trade-off. You're swapping decrease in price for increase in customers. Now, how do I decide if this was a good move? Because remember, I said monopolies are price setters or price makers. But how do we decide if this is a good idea? Let's calculate the marginal revenue. Now, in your graph, in your screen, there is a marginal revenue calculation. Your marginal revenue equals your change in revenue. Okay, so marginal revenue equals change in revenue, and your change in revenue is 400 times 0.65, which is this, minus 200 multiplied by 85 cents, which is this, divided by your change in quantity, 400 to 200 or 200 to 400. The change in quantity is 200. Therefore, your marginal revenue is 45 cents. That means that when we move from 200 units to 400 units, the extra revenue per unit that you're getting is 45 cents per unit. So you're clearly making more. Now, let me repeat this because I actually think this is quite important. When we are calculating the marginal cost of production, we are thinking, hey, hang on, what is the actual cost per unit when I increase my production by a certain amount? Now, we're doing the same exercise here for marginal revenue. Hypothetically speaking, I am producing 200 water bottles. Now I'm thinking of producing 400 water bottles. The marginal cost that I'm telling you that you are moving from 200 to 400 water bottles, the extra revenue that you get when you increase production is 45 cents per water bottle. Okay. Now, each of the 400 water bottles will give you an extra revenue of 45 cents per unit. So we know, hey, increased production is good. The area in pink or orange, sorry, I have already kind of the area in black, is actually greater than the area in, the area in pink. Okay, so that area is bigger when we calculated it. So when we increase in production, we increase our total revenue. Let's then put all of that together. We put in your number of workers. We've put in units per day, increasing by 200. We show you your market price. Your market price is your marginal benefit, is your demand curve. Excuse me. Your marginal revenue is your change in revenue divided by change in quantity, and your marginal cost curves comes from your previous table where we mentioned that that was constant. Now we are going to use the cost benefit principle. Okay, you would have heard that because we talked about that a lot before. Cost benefit principle. Now, the cost benefit principle states that we should take action if the extra marginal cost of that action is less or smaller than the extra benefit or the marginal revenue. Now, have a look at this. If we hire one worker from 0 to 1, we increase the quantity by 200. Okay. We are going to charge 85 cents. Our total revenue is 170. Our marginal cost we know is constant. And our marginal revenue is 0.85 because your change in revenue, which is 170 minus 0, divided by 200 minus 0 gives you 0.85. Okay. So here, our marginal cost is less than our marginal revenue. So our marginal revenue per unit is still bigger than our marginal cost. So yes, we will hire the first worker. Good job. Then we look at the next worker. If we hire another worker, we're going to produce another $200 worth of goods at the cost of 65 cents, giving us a total revenue of 260. Our marginal cost is still the same. Our change in total cost divided by change in quantity, that didn't change. We got that from the previous slide, previous table. What about the 45? I'm only going to do 2, and then you guys can figure it out. Change in revenue. So 260 minus 170 divided by 400 minus 200. That gives you 0.45. 0.45 is still greater than your marginal cost of 0.05. So cost is still smaller than your benefit. So yay, we will hire worker number 2. Then we're going to look at worker number 3. If we hire worker number 3, we're going to produce 600 units the price is now 0.45 and our total revenue is 270. Marginal cost remains the same, but our marginal revenue is our change in revenue, which is 270 minus 260 divided by change in quantity, which is 600 minus 400. That will give you 0.05. Now, 0.05 marginal cost, 0.05 marginal revenue, that's equal. So that is your optimal choice. At worker number 3, this is your optimal choice. Your marginal revenue equals your marginal cost. Now, clearly, we don't need to calculate the rest, but we can have a look at the numbers. Your marginal revenue at worker number 4 is minus 0.35, and therefore 0.05 is greater than minus 0.35, and so is employing worker number 5. And so worker number 4 and worker number 5, no, we don't want to hire. Okay. Now, if you don't believe me, I would like you to add a couple of columns, add your total revenue column, calculate what your total revenue is, add your total cost column, add all your total costs, and add a profit column. Okay? I want you to try and calculate that if you don't believe me, just in case. Oh, sorry. All right. This is the exact same table as we saw previously, so please do not freak out. So far, what we've talked about is the optimum production decision for the monopolist, and that is to set the MR equals to MC at 0.05 and produce 600 units. But what is the optimum outcome for society? Is the monopolist looking after itself and maximizing the outcome and maximizing their profit? Is the monopolist also doing what's best for society? Question mark. Now, we know that at this particular point for the monopoly, producing at 600 is the optimal amount for the monopoly. Okay? It's good for the monopoly. But is this the optimal amount of production for society? Well, it can't be. Where is the surplus that is maximized? Your surplus is maximized where demand equals supply. Okay? Let's have a quick look on OneNote. The mouse refused to go. Okay, got it. We know your marginal cost is constant because that's 0.05. We know that your marginal benefit for 0.05, 0.25, 0.45, 0.65, 0.85, and then you plot 4, 6, 8, 1,000, and this is really, really rough, okay? So realistically, we know from our calculation earlier that they want to produce here. Yeah. But we know that the surplus is maximized where demand equals supply. So your demand here cuts your marginal cost curve. Apologies, that actually should be 1,000. So from the producers, from the perspective of society, okay, from the perspective of society, this 1,000 is what we call the socially optimal quantity. Okay. Now, the area above the price, below the demand curve, that's the entire area. Now, so for society, your marginal benefit must equals your marginal cost. And you will see it at 1,000. But for the producer, they want to be producing at 600, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And so the problem that we have now is we have a disagreement. We don't agree. Society wants you to produce 1,000 units. The monopolist only wants to produce 600 units. You don't have the same aligned incentives anymore, unlike perfect competition. This market may not result in the quantity that the society would like to see. And monopolists might end up doing things that is not optimal for society. Let's go back to your lecture slides. So here I said to sell the extra units of the good and extract new customers, the monopolist needs to decrease its price. And that affects all goods sold because the monopolist needs to charge all consumers the same price. And that's, what we call an implicit cost in increasing quantity sold. Now, we're going to talk about competition law. Have a look at this diagram. This is just a nicer version of what I did with you in the lecture. Now we're going to talk about competition law. Competition law denotes a law that is intended to foster market competition by regulating anti-competitive conduct of firms. What this does is to ensure that consumers are charged the lowest possible prices. Now, yes, there is a need for regulation because society doesn't agree with the monopolist. And sometimes competition law entails trying to get more firms into the market. But in situations like Facebook or Sydney Water or Twitter, where there are network economies or increasing returns to scale, it is sometimes not efficient to simply get more firms in. Therefore, the government is trying to implement an average cost pricing. An average cost pricing denotes a policy through which the government forces the monopolist to set the price and quantity at the intersection of the average total cost curve and the demand curve. I'm going to show you this on a diagram that I'm going to draw just to prove a point. Sorry. We know that this is your marginal cost. Okay. Now, your average total cost your demand and your let's say that's your marginal revenue. Okay. Now, remember what we talked about before when we said profit maximizing. Okay. Now, what the average cost pricing is trying to do is to eliminate any of the positive profits that's accruing to the monopolist. Okay. So, what did we say before? Society wants you to produce where marginal cost equals demand. So society wants you to produce here. But where you are going to produce as a monopoly, your profit maximizing output position is where MR equals to MC. So this is the quantity that the monopoly wants to produce. This is your price that the monopoly is setting. And where it touches the average total cost curve, this is your average total cost for the monopoly. Whereas when we're looking at the social point of view, that's the point that they want to produce. We're going to move it up to your average total cost. This is your average total cost for what the socially optimal point of production is. This is your quantity, which in our previous example was 1,000, and QM from our previous example was 600. But if this is your price, your average total cost is higher than your price. And so what we are saying here is, here, your monopoly producing where MR equals MC is maximizing their profit. But at the socially optimal point here, you're making a loss. This is not sustainable. If monopolies make a loss, they will leave the market. Why would you want to operate in a market that you're constantly making a loss because you're forced to? Right? So they would naturally want to produce at QM. As a result of this, right, if the monopoly leaves the market, everybody will be unhappy. So let's try and find a middle ground here. So we need to be careful when we regulate, because government probably doesn't want to set quantity at QS. They probably don't, because at that particular point, it will push the monopoly out of the market because they make a loss. So the government must be smart. They must pick a price where demand equals ATC. Okay, so they need to pick a point where demand is equals to ATC somewhere. Trying to find a color. Somewhere there. Okay. But at that particular point, at that particular price, your average total cost equals your price, and therefore monopolist makes zero profit. Now, we have a problem with average cost pricing. Okay, let me go back to the slide for a minute. Now, with average cost pricing, the government does not know your average total cost. Your government is only estimating. When you implement it, the firms have no incentive to invest in new technology. There's no incentive in investing in new technology so that they can lower their costs. When it's implemented, the firm's output is also allocatively inefficient. What does that mean? Allocatively inefficient is where the price asked for the goods exceeds their marginal cost. P is greater than marginal cost. Okay. Now, I'm going to try and finish first degree price discrimination so that we are in sync with the live lectures that I did before this. So let's have a look at what is first degree price discrimination. Now, what if a monopolist could set a different price for different consumers? Okay. Now, let's see if I can go back to one of the, this one will do. Let's say that the government knows everybody's willingness to pay. Okay, so I'm going to use this because later on we're going to talk about it in terms of the table. So let me just annotate it on the diagram for you so that at least you have something that you can work on. So imagine that this is the price. Italians, French, Americans, Canadians, and Brazilians. Sorry for the ugly writing, and the spelling was hideous. Now, imagine that the Italians, you're able to charge 200 Italians at 85 cents. And so basically, that becomes the total revenue there. For 200 people, 200 consumers, we're charging the first 200 consumers 85 cents, which is exactly what they are willing to pay. So that's their marginal benefit. So this happens if the monopoly could tailor to individual consumers, assuming that you can read the minds of these people willing to pay. The next 200 consumers have a lower willingness to pay. They are only willing to pay 65 cents. So 65 cents multiplied by the next 200. Then we go to the Americans. The Americans are only willing to pay 45 cents. So we charge them 45 cents. Then we go to the Canadians. The Canadians are very clever. They're only willing to pay 25 cents. And the Brazilians are only willing to pay 5 cents. Okay. And what this means, what this does, this is what we call first degree price discrimination, meaning that you can charge a different price to different consumers. Therefore, there's no longer one price for everyone, but it is one price for each group of consumers. The monopolists can identify different groups of consumers living in the different countries, and the people living in the country have a different willingness to pay. Therefore, the monopolist charges each country exactly the amount that they're willing to pay. Okay. Notice that in so doing, the monopolist ends up producing 1,000 units. And they charge 5 different prices. So this is optimal for the monopolist. It is also allocatively efficient, because 1,000 was the quantity that was socially efficient, and at 1,000 units, the monopolist is doing what is optimal for society. This is the best that we can do for society in terms of the surplus for the economy. However, there's a problem, there's a catch here, and that is that the monopolist is making all the surplus. The consumers are making a zero surplus. The monopolist is charging all at the maximum that they are willing to pay. So no surplus. There's no surplus whatsoever. Okay? So this is first degree price determination. Monopolist knows the maximum price, or your reservation price that we used previously in previous weeks. You can charge each consumer exactly his reservation price, assuming that you actually know what that reservation price is. First degree price determination describes a situation that the monopolist knows the reservation price of each consumer and is able to charge them his marginal benefit or his reservation price. Now, well, this is where I got that, and this is why I labeled it, because so, you have that comparison on a graph. Now, I've got 1 minute to go. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to talk about second degree price discrimination and third degree price discrimination on Monday next week before we start oligopoly. Thank you, everyone. I'm really sorry. I don't have any idea why there's no one in the chat room, and Trent doesn't seem to be there either. I don't really know what is happening, but please let me know if you have any issues, any questions, any problems. Please pop it in the chat. I don't really know what's going on, but hopefully the recording will be available, and you have all the different avenues. You can go to your workshops to actually ask the questions. All right, guys. I will see you all on Tuesday. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. Thank you very much for today. Bye, everyone. Bye. See you guys.